Today we're going to be reading through stories of people who traumatize back those who invade their privacy or just generally try to traumatize them first. Sure, I'll cut them off one day. For context, I'm unfortunately a gifted woman and had troubles with my chest for the longest time. It has always drawn unnecessary attention from men, especially drunk tards in their approximate 50s who know no boundaries. I work in a convenience store that has two spots under the same management, and I had to move from one spot to another because it got so bad in the first one, along with being yelled at by drunk customers who often like to brag about how they used to be in jail, that I had to move a spot farther away from my home but with calmer regulars. So there's this one regular client whom I actually liked because we'd always joke around and he seemed like a pleasant guy in general. Sometimes he came in drunk, but he was one of those funny drunks, so I didn't mind that much, until one day. That day, he decided to tell me something he has held inside for a long time. He said, "I must say, you have such beautiful breasts." I sort of snapped. With a smile, I told him, "Sure, I'll cut them off one day." He was confused at first and seemed like he didn't hear me, and even doubled down on the comment on my chest, so I repeated more clearly, "I'll cut them off one day." He was taken aback and asked me, but why? They're so gorgeous." So I clapped back in a stern voice, because I do not appreciate such comments and I politely ask you to quit it. Usually when I speak to clients, I pitch my voice up to sound more nice, but here I sounded deeper and serious. I'm a middle vocalist, so I have quite a vocal range. He got flustered and shamefully apologized to me, paid for his groceries and left. Standing in line, there was this older lady who followed him with a priceless stare, and when she came up to me, I switched back to my regular cutesy pitch, as if nothing happened. I laughed so hard when I was finally alone, never felt so proud of myself. Some people clearly have boundary issues. It shouldn't be something anyone has to deal with for any reason. It's very obviously not something that you should compliment, because people don't want to be objectified like that by just random people while they're working their day job. "You look too young to be a mum." I filled in for my parents today at my little sister's orientation because they couldn't make it. While I was having lunch with the other parents, one of the mums commented on how young I looked. I told her I had Jessica when I was 13. She choked on her salad. I mean, there are teen mums out there, but you kind of get what you ask for. You start commenting on someone's age, they're gonna either actually be in that situation or they could make it look like that so that you look like a dumb asshole. Why you should look up the person you try to threaten first. So I work in governmental service at the Road and Traffic Agency as an IT guy. We once had a new civil engineer at our location who demanded he get a new MacBook because otherwise he wouldn't be able to work properly. I asked him why. He said he only works on Macs as every pro does. I told him that his notebook is equivalent in performance and there is no difference in the CAD software we use between the Mac and Windows versions. He kept yelling at me. Honestly, he behaved less than a 35-year-old man and more like my 4-year-old niece, and asked if I knew who he was. I declined, saying that he worked here for 3 weeks and we didn't have the opportunity to meet. He went on a whole story about how important he is because his dad is some higher up in the department and he could get what he wants or he'd get me fired. I just stood up, grabbed a bit of stuff from my cabinet and told him to follow me. We walked across the floor to the lobby, where at the bulletin board hung the letter announcing the election results for the staff council. I pointed at the letter and asked him to read that name. I then pointed at my name tag on my shirt. He looked at me confused. "Are you threatening me? I'll make sure you won't get a job in the state." I just handed him a copy of the law regarding staff councils in the state that I took from my cabinet earlier. Paragraph 40. I'm not going anywhere. For context, that paragraph states that a member of the staff council has a higher protection from termination or relocation than a regular employee, basically meaning that I can't be fired for the duration of my mandate unless for extreme circumstances. Oh, that whole "don't you know who I am?" No one ever does. Most of the time when someone says that, it's because no one knows who they are. Jamba Juice. So I was reflecting on this experience the other day, and then I suddenly discovered the sub, so I'll just share. I was a 17-year-old female back in the 20-teens and worked at Jamba Juice during high school. I enjoyed just about all parts of my job. It was kind of as good as it gets, with great coworkers, manager, free smoothies. Only complaints were usually the occasional crabby customer. Some necessary context that I don't often share too publicly is I was pretty good at school and had gotten a perfect score on the ACT my first try. We had one regular, I'll call him Eric. because that was his name. He always came in with the most specific custom orders and a super condescending attitude. One day he came in asking for a double matcha shot or something or other with soy, and I don't really know what he wanted, but he started yelling at me in front of the other customers, and a manager had to come help me enter the order so he would be charged the way he wanted. I went back behind the orange juice machine to cry while someone else made it. The next part of the story happened while I was composing myself behind the orange juice machine. I couldn't hear it over the sound of the blenders. Eric goes and sits down next to another customer and says, "Geez, no wonder these people work at a Jamba Juice," laughs in elitism. Well, it turns out that customer was my backdoor neighbor of 15 years. A broad, 6'5" man with a booming voice. My neighbor ripped into Eric, saying how I was smarter than everyone in the building combined, how he should be ashamed for treating people that way. Listed basically all my stats and accomplishments. I never saw Eric again. Neighbor told the story to my dad. I still hug my neighbor anytime I see him. I mean, that's some great karma from your next door neighbor, who clearly is a very nice person and very proud of you. I mean, good on you for having that. My mum taught me well. So in the 1980s, streaking and flashing were popular. I lived in an LA suburb, and guys flashing their privates was a thing. My mum told me after the second time, I was 7, to never give the guy the satisfaction of being shocked or cowering. We were sitting in the movie's parking lot, trying to decide which one to see. A guy walks up, gets his crotch, he was tall, right at my window, pops it out and says something about it being the best movie around. My mum made eye contact with me, feigned boredom and said, "Well, if that is a movie, I hope you're only charging matinee prices." I'm going to be honest, I had no idea why it was funny then, but when I told my dad, he fell out laughing. Later, I figured it out. I mean, if you're gonna go around doing that, someone is gonna call you out for not having the biggest package. Ask and you shall receive. My 25F, Dad 63M, died a few months ago. It was very traumatic for me as I was the one who found him, did CPR, and he still didn't come back. We also lived together. Fast forward to today. I'm at the psychiatrist's office for obvious reasons, and the nurse asked me how I'm doing and how Thanksgiving went while we were waiting for the doctor to come in. I say not good, and it's getting really hard now that my dad is gone. She does the whole song and dance, "Sorry for your loss, it gets easier," all that stuff. I just say, "Yeah, thank you, things suck right now." There's a lull in the conversation, and she decides it's a good time to ask, "How did he die?" So I explain in excruciating and vivid detail the color of my dad's skin, his eyes, lips, the scrapes on my legs from trying to pick him up, and the feeling of giving him compressions, all while staring her dead in the eyes. Homegirl went white as a ghost and just says, "I can see why you have trouble sleeping." And that's a lesson for not asking weird, intrusive questions. I have a very limited family myself, so the death of a relative isn't something that I've had to go through myself, but I can absolutely see, even for other reasons, why asking how someone died is maybe not the best idea, especially if they're at a psychiatrist's office. Subway creep humiliated. This happened a few years ago, 22 at the time, when my childhood best friend was visiting me in New York City. Anyone who has ever been to New York is probably familiar with how colorful the subway can be. My best friend is one of the most outgoing, extroverted, unapologetically outspoken people you could ever meet, and it was her first time in the city. So she was positively living for the platform musicians, the mariachi band in the cars, the break dancers, etc. During one trip into Queens, there was a man on the Q train dressed in a terrifying ratty bunny costume and telling the most awkward jokes into a child's mother's goose microphone and amp toy. And while I was deeply creeped out, Bestie was all energy and excitement. Nothing can faze her. Her vibe cannot be killed. This would prove to be the subway creep's downfall. The incident occurred during the second week of her visit. It was around 8 p.m. on a Thursday, and Bestie, me, and another friend of mine, also female, were on the A train. Our car was pretty empty, aside from the 3 of us. There were maybe 3 other solo women and an elderly mother plus an adult daughter pair, an elderly man, and a subway creep. Subway creep was in one of the 2-seater benches at the end of the subway car, perpendicular to our group, wearing a grey Nike sweatsuit. For those not familiar in the New York subway system, the A train runs express between 125th and 59th Street. As the train departed from the 125th Street station, Subway Creep proceeds to take his custard chucker out of his pants and started going to town. Everyone in the subway car freezes. We are all putting on the patented New York City mind your own business, see no evil, hear no evil attitude, but the disgust and unease is palpable. I assume this is part of what Subway Creep got off on, because he kept staring at different targets, particularly elderly mother plus daughter pair. Everyone is tense, a little afraid, and trying to avoid looking at him. Except my bad bee of a bestie. The discomfort in the air is thick as a cloud, until my best friend lets out the loudest, most disrespectful laugh I have ever heard in my entire life. It's the kind of laugh that can only be done with mouth open and tongue sticking out. It's the kind of laugh that's probably copyrighted by either Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion. And it immediately banishes back the discomfort in the air like Samwise Gamgee holding up the light of Arendelle in Shelob's lair. She proceeds to yell, "This MFer got his eggplant out," whilst whipping out her phone and starting to record Subway Creep. She then continues to cackle as the light from the flash shines on him, like a spotlight. There are literal tears of laughter in her eyes, and every so often she wheezes from the sheer depth of her hilarity. Her amusement becomes infectious, and the next moment, most of the other people in the subway car are also laughing, at Bestie's enthusiasm, at her animated amusement, and at the Subway Creep, who has folded in on himself in shame now that the power has been stripped and he's been reduced to a limp clown by the indomitable force of my bestie's derisive laughter. She is merciless. As he shrinks away, she urges, "Nah, why you shy now? Keep going." He cannot possibly. At that point, the subway pulls into the 59th station finally, and Subway Creep snatches his backpack and literally runs off the train. After that, several of the other passengers, including mother-daughter pair, start chatting and laughing with my bestie as we continue on our outing. Later on the evening, my other friend who was with us mentioned how Bestie's reaction turned into a harrowing moment into such a memorable, hilarious one. Bestie truly doesn't understand the harrowing part, but agrees with the hilarious part. She is an icon. She is my idol. I mean, yeah, that's a good way to stop someone like that. Just start laughing at it. People who do this tend to, as they say, enjoy that power, but it's fairly easy to take that power away from them, and they don't really know what to do once that happens, because that's just not part of their plan. Ask stupid questions, win stupid prizes. My 53F name is one that, when shorted a little, can either be male or female, or even androgynous. I was at work the other day. This customer asked me out of the blue if my dad had wanted a boy. I looked at him dumbfounded, could not figure out where the question came from. I guess it had something to do with my name, but I looked at him and said, "My dad did have a boy a year before I was born, but he only lived for 3 hours," and just stared at him. He actually had the nerve to act like he didn't hear me, but he did go rather pale. I mean, that title sums it up pretty well. Ask stupid questions, win stupid prizes. You don't own the road. This happened a few weeks ago. Some backstory is needed. My best friend Kay, 40s, had neighbors move in next door a few years ago. Her house is right in front of the pond in her neighborhood. When her husband Jay met them, the husband mentioned they picked their house because he liked to watch the children. They added the pond later. Creepy. After this, anytime anyone parked on the street, the couple would come out and ask them to move so their view wasn't blocked. Even parts of the street not next to their house. More backstory. My mother was recently diagnosed with terminal cancer and had to be moved to Kay's house. I had to ask to take a leave from work to help take care of her. We also had hospice coming out to help her. The night before everything happened, I had to run an errand and parked in front of the mailbox when I got back. Jay reminded me I had to move the car before the mailman got there. The next morning, we had 3 different people from hospice treating my mum, and after they all left, I ran to move my car. I parked to the left of their driveway, in between the 2 houses. As I was getting out of the car, the wife comes running up to my car. "Can you please park in front of your house? We want to look at the pond." "Ma'am, I have to be somewhere in a few hours, so I won't be here long." She let out a deep sigh. "We have told your father that the only reason we bought this house was because we wanted to watch the pond. There has already been a bunch of cars blocking this view all morning. We are old and this is all we want." I was over this. I grabbed something from my back seat and turned back to her. "I'm sorry that the people coming to help my dying mother blocked your view, but I'm not moving my car. It will be moved in a few hours." The blood quickly drained from her face. "Your mother was dying?" "Yes." I turned to walk away and she tried to apologize. I just waved her off. I went back into the house and was telling Kay what happened and realized what she had said first. She called Jay my dad. His woman couldn't tell the difference between me, 40, and my 24-year-old niece. She thought I was talking about Kay. We haven't seen her since. I mean, it is kind of creepy that they only bought a house just so they could look at the pond, which I assume has kids playing in it. I'm surprised that they're willing to admit that. Maybe something else is going on there, but that's kinda what it sounds like. Don't ask questions if you don't want to know. So my husband died 2 years ago. I was due to start a new job that worked with the company he worked for. Of course, due to circumstances, they were kind enough to hold my position until I was ready. The company my husband worked for sent out a company-wide email and I got a ton of support. Fast forward about 6 months and everyone with my husband's company knows that I work at my location, so it's like a reunion every day. On this afternoon, however, one of the most senior people at my husband's company comes in and she's like, "Yeah, I've seen him around. Nice guy." Typical stuff. And then she says, "But you know, I haven't seen him around lately. What's he up to?" I just looked at her and blinked a couple of times. Again, they sent out an email announcing my husband's death, so my mind was spinning a bit over the cluelessness and so. I looked at her and said, "Oh, well, he's dead." The color drained from her face spectacularly, and she turned and walked away. Moral of the story, don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. I'm not sure how she's missed that. You know, some people can be pretty clueless in the office, but reading an email about a death in the company, I feel like people tend to pick up on. Again, I don't know how big this company is, but within most companies, you'd pretty well know if someone died. Well, my grandma did die. My grandma wasn't doing well and ended up passing the day after her birthday, November 25th this year. Some other things have been going on too, and I've been kind of down. My friends asked me to go out dancing, and I decided to join them for the distraction. I tried to get into the spirit of things, but was still kind of down, so I decided to take a break and sit for a minute to get myself together. After a little bit, a mutual that we met came over and said, "What's your problem? You look like someone died," and started laughing. So I just looked at her and said, "Well, my grandma just died, but I'll try not to look like she did." Poor girl's face turned so pale and she started apologizing, but not gonna lie, it actually made me laugh and helped me get out of my funk a little bit. Seems to be a common theme of people not understanding that maybe if someone looks like someone they know died, maybe someone they know did die. You know, it doesn't seem to be rocket science, but clearly it is. No, that pouch is not your sister's. So I was in the 7th grade at the time, and I was on my period. I had this cheetah print pouch with stuff like pads and underwear inside, and it fell out of my pocket and I didn't notice. When I came back to the classroom, this girl sitting behind me says, "Is that yours? I saw you with it earlier," pointing towards my pouch on a table in the front of the room. I thanked her and grabbed it. This boy, who had bullied me for years, saw this interaction and said, "No, that's my sister's. His sister is not in our grade," but I checked inside anyway. It was in fact mine. So I said, "If this is your sister's, then what's inside it?" He started spouting off things like keys, ID, money, chapstick, etc. I shook my head, but he kept insisting, so I responded with, "Would you like to see? This is mine." I handed it to him, and he took it and opened it. He saw the contents of my pouch, and he stares for a second. I was holding back laughter at this point. He tries to embarrass me by going around to his friends with it and saying, "Whoa, there are diapers in here." It did not work. I explained to him what pads are, like he was a 2-year-old. He gave me back my pouch, and he never tried to take my things again. It seems like this dude was just trying to bully you, because how would his sister's pouch have gotten into your classroom? Unless he brought it there himself, which the line of logicking just isn't there. But I'm glad he looked stupid. I think hopefully his mates will believe him for that for a little bit. Alright, I think that's enough trauma for one day. Like the video, subscribe, do all that cool stuff, and we'll see you in another one.